it's interesting that Trump still imagines that he can call the tune in Ukraine when he's actually made himself pretty marginal because, again, the U.S. is providing almost no aid to Ukraine, so it's not clear why the Ukrainians should listen to him. The Europeans have done a pretty good job of stepping forward. I mean, there's still some critical shortages, and the fact is that the U.S. is not providing enough Patriot interceptors and some other capabilities, and unfortunately, that means that Russian attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, including heating and electrical systems, have become much more effective, and the suffering of the Ukrainian people this winter has been really tragic to see.
Yesterday was the 4th anniversary of the Ukraine war. And when Russia launched this brutal invasion 4 years ago, I wonder, did you imagine in your darkest nightmare that this war would still be going on for 4 years later with such immense destruction and human suffering? And then secondly, do you see a way out for Ukraine to end this war while preserving its, sovereignty and security?
Well, first, let me just note the outrageous fact that yesterday, as you know, was in fact the 4th anniversary of Russia's unprovoked and evil aggression, and yet Trump did not say a word to condemn Russian aggression during his marathon State of the Union lasting almost 2 hours. He had 2 very brief mentions of Ukraine, and he treats the war as if it were like an automobile accident, this unfortunate event that happened, nobody's responsible for. And he only seems to care about Ukraine to the extent that he thinks he will get a Nobel Peace Prize out of it. But other than that, he can't, be bothered about it one way or the other. And it's been shocking to see that over the last year, U.S. aid to Ukraine has declined roughly 99%. Now, thankfully, the Europeans have stepped forward. Their aid has increased about 66%. So the Europeans are stepping into the breach. But to answer your direct question, no, when this awful, evil, unprovoked invasion began 4 years ago, I couldn't have possibly imagined that it would still be going on after 4 years. But I also didn't imagine that the Ukrainians would have as much success as they have had in stopping the Russian aggression. I mean, the Russians are advancing more slowly now than the armies did on the Western Front during World War I, and they are paying a fearful price, suffering the heaviest casualties in war that they have seen since World War II. I mean, they've lost well over 1 million men killed and wounded by this point, and there doesn't seem to be any way out because despite Trump's peace negotiations, there's only one person who can end this war, and it's Vladimir Putin. And Putin has shown no interest in actually ending the war short of achieving his objectives, which is to turn Ukraine into a Russian colony as it was for so much of its history. But I don't think Russia is going to succeed in that. And I think it's interesting that Trump still imagines that he can call the tune in Ukraine when he's actually made himself pretty marginal because, again, the U.S. is providing almost no aid to Ukraine, so it's not clear why the Ukrainians should listen to him. The Europeans have done a pretty good job of stepping forward. I mean, there's still some critical shortages, and the fact is that the U.S. is not providing enough Patriot interceptors and some other capabilities, and unfortunately, that means that Russian attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, including heating and electrical systems, have become much more effective, and the suffering of the Ukrainian people this winter has been really tragic to see. But the Ukrainians are also, they are really geniuses at improvisation, and they've done a tremendous job of building one of the world's great drone industries from scratch. And drones are now inflicting 70-80% of the casualties at the front. I mean, the Russians, to be fair, have their own drone industry, but the Ukrainians say that for the last 2 or 3 months, they've actually managed to kill more Russian soldiers than the Russians are able to field to replace them. So if that trend continues, it's going to make it very difficult, not impossible, but more difficult for Putin to continue the war. And I think you're also seeing Russia suffering some economic damage from Western sanctions, including some sanctions, to be fair, imposed by Trump. Trump certainly has not lifted the sanctions, which Putin clearly hopes that he would do. And so I think between the economic pressure and the heavy loss of life on the Russian side without any real advance at the front, it's increasing their pressure on Putin. But again, not to the point where he's actually going to end the war anytime soon, because he's a one-man dictatorship, basically, so he doesn't rely on popular support. I mean, imagine if this were like America during the Vietnam era when we suffered much lower casualties and you had mass demonstrations in the streets. Of course, in Russia, anybody who demonstrated would get locked up.
Hi, I'm Pat Morrison, one of the hosts of America at a Crossroads. If you like this video, don't just watch. Head over to our website where you can subscribe for early access to new programs, see our upcoming schedules, and connect directly with our guests in our weekly live streams. Thank you for watching.
You think Putin could survive politically if he just said, oops, it was a mistake, we'll go back to the status quo ante?
I mean, he wouldn't say it's a mistake. He would lie in the way that any dictator would. He would say that they've achieved amazing success. They've grabbed 20% of Ukraine. They've liberated the Russian heartland of Ukraine and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, I don't see why he wouldn't survive. He's an absolute dictator, and I don't see, is he going to get overthrown in a coup if he stops the war now? I doubt it. I mean, I don't think there's that much support in Russia for actually continuing the war beyond Putin. I'm sure even a lot of his inner circle are probably happy to end it if he would agree.
And I want to remind you that next week, Wednesday, March 4th, at this very, very time, the extraordinary American documentary filmmaker Ken Burns and historian author Rick Atkinson will be in conversation with Pat Morrison on Revolutionary Crossroads, how America's founding era illuminates today's struggle for America's future. Thank you so much for being with us. And once again, Max, thank you so much.